get this kicked off.
Sweet.
We are here, Dr. Emily Stacy and I. I'm James Davenport, by the way. I'm the sidekick in this little endeavor.
Right. What is this called?
This is, it's been so long since we've done one.
Oh my goodness. It's
Not
been a while.
My Generation, the podcast,
there
right?
we are.
And today we are talking all things elections.
Yes.
I've heard a rumor there's a presidential election next year.
Right. I've heard a rumor in 2020 that there's a presidential election in 2024.
Yes, right.
Didn't it start around then?
It felt like it kind of did, right? Or maybe the 2020 election just never really ended. I don't know.
Yeah.
But here's my quick rundown of what's going to happen in 2024.
You're just jumping right into
Right?
this.
This is how I'm going to frame it, right? Which is, we're going to get the same two folks we had last time,
Okay.
and nobody wants that option.
Okay.
Either one.
All right.
Right?
Right.
That's what we're going to be stuck with.
Okay. This is your great.
That's my thing. That's what we're going to get. We're going to get the worst of every option that's out there.
Okay.
We know we're going to be stuck with that.
I mean.
And nobody wants it, but that's what we're going to get.
Well, man, I guess we just wrapped this show in like 2 minutes.
There you go, right?
I guess we're done.
That's all you need to know about 2024.
Can we start from the top, maybe?
All right.
I mean, yes, I do not disagree with you at all. Right, and we can go into the two who we know it's going to be in depth just a little bit later, because I do believe that it's important for us to talk about those two front runners on both sides of the aisle, because obviously one may be running from prison.
Yeah, could be,
or
right?
At least having been charged.
Having had a conviction.
Yeah,
maybe.
a conviction.
Who
Thank
knows,
you.
right?
Another C word. And then the other one is obviously running from a place of being extremely old. Both of them are actually running from that same position.
Both of them are old, right?
Which we will point out momentarily. But before we make this just final grand pontification, we should probably tell the folks who's running. And you would be surprised, right?
If they don't know,
James Davenport's on one today.
They
My goodness.
stay home. If you don't know who's running by now, just stay home.
Well, I think that you might even be surprised, right? Because a total at this point are 17 people. So can you name 17 people that are running for election?
Well, let's see. I can name the Republicans, and I know
All of them?
the two Democrats.
Okay.
There may be more that I don't know. If they're independents, okay.
No.
You don't have to know the independents.
It's okay. Yeah, there's only one. There's only one
They're not gonna
third-party
get anything.
candidate.
Yeah,
So can you name 16 people?
Let's see. I don't know. So we've got obviously Trump and Biden.
Of course.
Okay. DeSantis.
Okay.
Right. You've got Nikki Haley.
Okay.
You've got Asa Hutchinson from Arkansas.
Okay.
He's a candidate.
He's
he
a
was
candidate.
in the debate.
He's no-
all right.
He's not
You've got
anybody.
the guy whose name I don't remember from North Dakota, the former governor of North Dakota, right?
Right. Elder.
Yeah, that person.
That guy.
You've got, let's see, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Ramaswamy,
Right.
uh-huh.
All right. You got
Kind of missing a big one.
him. I said DeSantis.
Well, You're still missing a pretty big one.
Am I missing a big one? You got Tim Scott from South Carolina.
That's definitely not a big one.
Not a big one?
No, he's a
you've
token
got,
one.
on the Democrat side, you've got Kennedy Jr., right? Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I don't consider him a Democrat,
You
but
don't?
yes, he's under the party label. But yes, I'll go there in a
He's
little bit.
well, never mind. I don't want to color anybody's opinion, but
You're missing.
he's not a mainstream
former
candidate.
Vice President of the United
Oh,
States, right? My child right there is hey.
I don't consider him a major candidate either. I mean, if you look at polling,
Ouch.
I mean, he's like in low single digits,
He is,
right?
we'll get to the polls momentarily.
Yeah,
so let me run down really quickly. So Professor Davenport got most of them. So your three Democrats are, of course, Joe Biden, your incumbent president. The crazy lady, you forgot Marianne Williamson. She's
that's
fabulous.
right, yeah.
If you've ever, man. She's a spiritualist. She's one of those Crystal Levin ladies. Like, she is worth the watch, dude. If they actually do a Democratic debate, which they're not going to do, but should you get the opportunity, you should look up some of her debates from 2016 because they were fantastic.
Under what circumstances would Joe Biden have to feel compelled to do a debate with his Democrat.
Yeah, because the other one is RFK, right?
And he doesn't want to give RFK any credit.
No, absolutely not, right? In fact, the Republican Party, I think, almost wants to steal RFK at this point. I do not consider him a Democrat, right? He is a Democrat in name only. He's a dino, right? A prominent anti-vaxxer, kind of says a lot of wackadoodle things, not taken terribly seriously within party politics, has had to make a couple of different apologies so far on the campaign trail. So I can't imagine a world in which the Democratic establishment allows for there to be any sort of
at one time, the Kennedy name would have made you automatically credible.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That ship has sailed.
Okay.
Yeah, I think when the Ginger Kennedy got into Congress, I think that ship just went away. In terms of the Republicans, let's not, I don't know, we don't want to hate on the Kennedys too much. You never know who's watching. So in terms of the Republicans, right? Obviously Trump, Nikki Haley, you're correct.
Right.
Former governor of South Carolina and a United Nations ambassador under Donald Trump, who I was pretty darn sure, if you were taking my class in 2019, whenever she deuced out, 2018, I'm sorry, whenever she quit her ambassador position, that's a coveted spot. In terms of your government, I was pretty sure she was going to run for president in 2020 against Trump, but she didn't end up doing that. Nikki Haley is the only female Republican running, and so it's not been any shock if you've watched the last debate, and then the next one is next Wednesday night on the 27th. All of the abortion questions immediately are lobbed to Nikki Haley, so kind of pay attention to that pattern as we go through, because she's the only female standing on the stage, and she also does like to mention that and remind folks that she's the only female on the stage. Vivek Ramaswamy, you're correct about that, who's actually polling in certain polls polling ahead of DeSantis and right behind Trump. According to the internet, he was the winner of the first GOP debate, which was terrifying because if you watch that debate, that man didn't say anything that was in the realm of reality.
Well, you don't have to, right? You just got to be big and large and dominate
Very
the conversation,
bombastic.
right?
Yeah,
and
he's very bombastic. It says something whenever a kid like that, he's a millennial, right? He's young, of Indian heritage. It says something whenever a guy like that can hold his own against Chris Christie and come out as the bombastic candidate on stage.
Well, look,
that's a big deal. He is also the one that you will have note rapped, and who Eminem has sent a cease and desist letter to because he rapped "Lose Yourself" at the Iowa State Fair recently. So Ramaswamy not too big on the rapper front at this stage of life.
He probably shouldn't quit his day job.
He probably should not quit his day job. Asa Hutchinson, Elder, Larry Elder, Brinkley, some names that you don't need to know. You'll never see them. Tim Scott, he is the African-American, lone African-American in the race. Republican senator, longtime senator from South Carolina. Is interesting, I think, this time. I could have seen him running and being a credible Republican candidate in the future. I'm not really sure why, in terms of such an election, a campaign that is in such turmoil.
He was so out of place in that first debate.
Very much so.
I mean, he was the one person not trying to be out there and aggressive and
he wanted
all of that,
to
right?
seem like the
if
the
you were looking
moderate.
for someone acting like what you would think a statesman would act like,
that's who you want to vote for.
But he was so out of place on that stage because nobody else was doing it.
Because our politics have shifted so far to circus level that it's hard for us to come back to, oh, this is a boring debate about policy and how these people are going to help us instead of attacking one another. And so, a perfectly moderate conservative in any other race just seems like a snore, right? Sort of like Jeb Bush. Then you have Ron DeSantis, who is having quite a week, my friends. If you've not been paying attention, he and the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, have been exchanging words. So DeSantis, obviously governor of Florida, was once a very popular governor of Florida, to be quite honest, even through the pandemic. Florida was one of the first states to adopt and really encourage vaccines, but has completely done a 180, and of course got elected governor of Florida, largely based on Trump's endorsement of him. And so he's kind of pushed himself further to that MAGA right and is now running against Donald Trump, which is kind of a pretty dangerous prospect. In fact, the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, noted in an interview earlier this week that DeSantis is nowhere near Trump's level, that he would never get the nomination. And so they've been having kind of a fun little battle in the press recently.
Well, DeSantis did get the endorsement of our very own governor, Kevin Stitt.
He's been here quite a bit, actually.
So I'm sure that's going to make all the difference.
I'm not going to hold my breath on that.
You don't think so?
Not at all.
Okay.
Then you have Chris Christie, a guy whose last name is Burgum. I can't remember. What's his first name? Burgum, yeah. I can't remember his name. And then Hurd, who is another Texas congressman who is not polling anywhere. So you've got 17 people running so far, but really, as we mentioned, probably about 4 at this point that are viable. Yeah, absolutely.
And and some of these folks, you get the feeling, aren't really running for president. They're running for something else, something in the future.
Yeah.
They want to be in the next administration, but they're not really serious about it. They don't really believe they're going to.
That was your takeaway, right? I remember very vividly at the end of the first debate in August, you saying that these were a group of very unserious people.
That was my number one takeaway from that first debate, was none of those folks were serious candidates.
I am just not sure who on that stage would be running for like a vice presidential slot. Like
Ramaswamy is.
Okay, fine, fair enough. I will concede that point only. I think the rest of them are trying very hard to position themselves to the middle of Trump, or at least somewhere away from Trump.
This is the hard challenge that any of those folks have.
Yeah.
Trump looms over that party like nothing else. And you're trying to run against the person in that party. And I think the polling is reflecting that right now, right? Yeah. For those who may have thought, well, once he starts getting charged with these things, well, his numbers will go down. No!
Right.
No. His polling has just went up and up with every additional charge. And I don't know, the dynamics there are somewhat crazy. I don't think anybody really seriously. I think some people thought that once that the courts got involved and once you started getting convictions in places like Georgia, which is still primarily Republican, right? In places like Georgia, that people would finally start saying maybe we need, but it just seems to have galvanized support for him in the Republican Party now. Among independents, not so much. Among Democrats, certainly not. But amongst those Republicans, it seems to have galvanized support for him, not reduced it.
Yeah, and one person who I think was really on the train that, man, maybe if some of these indictments can come through, maybe he'll slow down, is Mike Pence, right? Who has made it a point in almost every interview that he does, and certainly in that first debate, and I can't imagine that he will do anything different next Wednesday, continue to tout the fact that he didn't overturn the election, but he didn't let your democracy crumble, and that's really his only talking point.
But that's not appealing to those Trump voters.
It is not at all. That was my point.
And if you remember that debate, anybody who was critical, and even Pence, who was critical of Trump, they got booed pretty loudly.
Yes.
If you said anything critical. And at one point, Christie was like, you can boo me all you want. It doesn't make what I'm saying not true.
He loves it.
Right?
Chris Christie thrives on that, though.
Yeah, I think, I just get the sense Christie is just there to be a thorn in Trump's side.
Agree. Hard agree.
Right.
Which I think somebody needs to be. If there's not really any of those Republicans that we mentioned that is taking it to the mat, taking it to Trump in the way that Christie is, really explaining the indictments, what it would mean, to have a president running from prison, which we've had before. But again, he's really the only one that has been brave enough to come straight out, invoke his name, take the booze and keep on moving.
Right.
Nobody else seems brave enough at this point.
Yeah, no, and that's why I was thinking, Ramaswamy was sitting there. He basically he's playing Trump in these debates.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
and my question
agree.
is, in what universe does Trump feel compelled to show up to a
Exactly.
debate either? Right?
Yeah.
We know Biden won't. There's no need to, right? Will Trump ever feel compelled to? And I'm not if his polling stays like it is.
There's no
I'm not
need.
sure
Yeah.
he needs to either.
Absolutely.
Right?
So it has been reported just this morning. Trump will not be attending the debate next week on Wednesday. In fact, he has a completely different agenda item. So during the debate, he has scheduled a visit to Michigan to visit the striking auto workers, which is an interesting move for him. As you should know, certainly in 2016, it was union, it was labor that got Trump elected on that kind of silent majority.
Sure.
These people are ignored, the working class, etc. 2020, that same labor union, working households flipped to Biden. And so it's not really a demographic that's super excited or super Trumpy, if you will. So it'll be an interesting moment, PR moment certainly, for Donald Trump. Can he detract attention away from those, 14 folks, 7 folks probably, roughly, that are going to be on stage next Wednesday and make it about him?
Yeah. The interesting thing here is that, yes, Trump appeals to a segment of voters that historically have been Democratic.
Yes.
He did that in 2016.
Yes.
Did that again in 2020, but just not to
Not
the
enough.
extent that, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is where Democrats are kind of stuck, right? If you look at polling, the majority of Democrats would rather Biden not run for re-election.
Yes.
Their problem is they don't have anybody else on the table that party feels like it could unify behind to beat Trump. Right? There's just nobody else to fill that void.
Not right now.
They feel like Biden is. Everybody else is going to be left of Biden. And so Biden is the one candidate who can pick up these more moderate voters, peel off some maybe even moderate Republicans or at least anti-Trump Republicans. And they just don't have anybody else that can step forward into that vacuum.
Nope.
And that's a problem for them.
Yes.
Trump's problem is you get outside the Republican Party and nobody likes him really. Now,
And a certain portion of the Republican
now
Party.
Biden. Now, what's interesting too? So Trump is picking up kind of these working class white voters. He's also picking up more of a share of minority voters than we've seen other Republican candidates do in the past. And so, at some point, the Biden team's going to have to figure out how do we peel some of those folks back to our side, right?
Yeah, Biden has, and that was kind of a clear indicator to a lot of politicos in his choice of Kamala Harris as vice president, right? The lack of diversity and the need to appeal to a specific base, and that specific base is women of color. I do think that the abortion issue is certainly going to help the Democrats.
It saved their bacon in 2022.
Absolutely. And in these special elections that we're seeing, like the Pennsylvania House, for example, this past week, Virginia coming up, Kansas last summer, et cetera, that issue is going to be a problem for Republicans.
In the presidential, the one person who on that stage last time that I felt got that was Nikki Haley.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was talking about, hey, we need to slow down this, right?
Yeah.
The one person who was totally tone deaf on that, Mike Pence.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of where I think Republicans are realizing there's a limit to
how far
they can go on that.
Yeah. The punishing
at least
the
some
women
of them,
line is
at
not
least
gonna
some
work.
of them are recognizing that, right?
Yeah.
But you have others that are more like Pence, and it's just full bore. We're going straight at people.
And
so.
I mean, that appeals to a certain segment of the base, but whenever you've got about 43% of folks in America that are identifying as independents, whenever you go that hard in the primary to win over that base, it becomes much, much harder to win those moderates in the center when you come to that general election. So Professor Davenport continues to note some polls. So I pulled Real Clear Politics yesterday. And so the time range, right, that they pulled these from September 6th to the 18th.
Okay.
So the average, so they're pulling polls from all over.
By the way, if you're not familiar with Real Clear Politics, you should become so. They're a great resource for a whole bunch of information on a whole overriding, and they do these polling averages. So if you want to look across multiple polls, they'll do the averages for you, so you can kind of get a feel for that.
Good stuff,
Yeah.
right? So right now, 58. Trump is sitting at 58.8 total percentage of the Republican, just primary candidates.
Voters.
Primary, yeah. DeSantis is at 12.5, and again, this is an average.
Boy, his has been dropping. Right?
Yes. Oh, like flies.
Yeah,
This is actually a
yes.
boost for him. He was roughly about 10 a couple weeks ago. I think he got just a little bit of a bump from that first debate, but it's not been much.
Right.
Ramaswamy is in third at 7.5. Haley at 5. Perfect 5. And then Pence comes in at 4.1, and then Christie at 2.3.
Wow.
So I mean, it's
Yeah.
rough, and I mean that Pence average is not great. Yeah, I mean, a vice president should be polling much higher than that. That is within that party. That's insane.
Part of Pence's problem is in an age where, yes, personality matters, he doesn't have much of one. And that's, I don't want to be super insulting. He's just very
He's
plain,
dry.
very
Yeah.
not very exciting. His Ramaswamy's very bombastic and
Yeah.
out there and going, and he's not that way.
Yeah.
And so in that kind of form, he does not compete well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, he's a dude from Indiana.
Ow!
Yeah.
Folks from Indiana
sorry
might
about
be
it.
offended about that, but, you know.
He's got the personality for me of like a Tim Kaine. There's just not much there.
He's very much just kind of milk toast, kind
Yeah.
of there. Here are my policies, and he's not going to veer away. It was very clear in that first debate. He is appealing to that kind of religious right portion of the party.
Which I don't think
much
any of the
more
other ones are.
Much more so
Interesting.
than any of the other candidates were directly doing so.
Yes.
But I don't know to what extent that's going to work for him at some point, right? And it's not, obviously, if he's at 4% or
4.1%.
4%.
That's rough.
Of the party.
Yeah.
And we're this deep into the
campaign,
process,
yeah.
right? And Trump is at roughly 60%.
Isn't that wild?
Now, we'll see, right? Polling and votes are not the same thing. We'll see when those first primaries come out. But if Trump's primaries are at that level, it's over, right? It's just over.
I mean, across the spread, if you look through like the various polls that they've aggregated, Emerson, Yahoo News, Harvard, etc., the lowest one that Trump is up 39 points on.
Wow.
I mean, so that's a scary spread, and it doesn't. I mean, you're going to have to really make a dent in those voters now, right? These early polls, as any pollster, any political science person will tell you, these early polls don't really typically mean a whole lot, but man, when you have an average like that,
that's dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then this begs the question, what happens if he gets charged?
You mean convicted?
Or convicted, I'm sorry, yes, my C words. Yes, what happens if he gets convicted?
I don't think it matters much.
Yeah.
I really don't, at least at this point.
Yeah.
He's had, you look at how many, in these states that he was claiming fraud, right, election fraud in 2020, how many of those states Republican officials were coming out and saying, that's not true.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter.
No.
It did not matter one bit to his voters, right? And I think for the base of his voters, a conviction won't matter either. It'll be one more, they're out to get us, and we've got to fight back and push on, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, conceivably, I don't know, depending on where he's convicted, what he's convicted for, if he'll actually see the inside of a jail cell, right? But running as someone who has been convicted would be really interesting. And
especially of an election crime or an election-related crime.
Yes,
correct?
right. And what Republicans have to ask themselves is, how are independents, right? We know, look, Trump is not going to win over many, if any, Democrats, right?
No.
So the game is for those independent voters, those moderate voters,
absolutely.
right? how are they going to perceive this? And right now, I don't think Trump is still doing just fantastically well with independent voters.
Yeah.
What's saving him is neither is Biden.
Yeah, right.
They're not just all clamoring, we love Biden either. And so next year could be even crazier than 2020.
2021 is what I'm concerned about, right? So that aggregate anger and that feeling of they cheated me out of something or cheated us out of something.
Right.
That's my concern, right? And we kind of talked about this anecdotally yesterday. It concerns me what could happen if those angry citizens feel like Trump has been cheated out of.
Well, it is certainly something we have to take into account.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we can do about it.
Yeah.
Right?
There's really not anything. Right?
I'm not sure what we can do about that. Right. It doesn't seem to matter if you can lay out, look, it wasn't stolen. Look, there was no evidence.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to matter. It's almost look, we have this attitude, and this attitude is what matters to us, not factual information in this regard.
Which is where we both are concerned for the future of the Republican Party, right? I've been preaching for, since 2012, really, that both of your political parties have identity crises, right? After Mitt Romney's just utter failure, it was pretty clear that the Republicans had no idea who their base was anymore, right? And that allowed for Donald Trump to foment and to redefine what it was.
Well, if you look at it, right, so the Democrat Party has by and large become the party of wealthy, college-educated people, right? And the Republican Party is trying to figure out where, because that used to be who they were, right?
Yes, it did.
And now they're trying to figure out, well, then do we go after these folks? And there's a large segment within the Republican Party, kind of affiliated think tanks and stuff, and are all saying, yes, go after those blue-collar workers that the Democrats are ignoring or taking for granted. Go after certain minority votes that you can make the same case to, that they've left you behind as well, and see what will happen. That has an interesting thing in which policies that the two parties have held for a while might be seeming to reverse, right? To switch on some things. And so we'll see how that plays out. But yes, right now you seem to have some type of realignment going on.
That was the word that was on my tongue.
And we don't know how extensive it'll be. I mean, when you're in the middle of it, that's hard to figure out. But it does seem to be something that's going on, and where everything will land is interesting. Here's my thing: if you push me hard enough, this is what I will tell you: there is no Republican Party any longer. There is Trump Party. And that's what that party has become. And if you don't believe me, just go back to 2020 when the Republican Party said, you know what, we're not even going to put a platform together. Whatever Trump says, that's our platform.
That's fair.
And that's what they did, right? And the polling is revealing this. And I think if you see in those early primaries, if you see Trump winning at a level that's anywhere close to what his polling is, it will just confirm that is now Trump Party. And I'm sorry to all of these other candidates that are running, but you can't beat Trump in Trump Party.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just can't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the situation they're all finding themselves. And I know I've got some friends that are working on some of the other Republican campaigns. They're all going to be mad at me. You don't know, we're making gains. It's going to be. And show me the proof, right? At the end of the day, show me the proof. Right now, the only proof we have is the polling. Next year, we'll have actual election results. Maybe those will be different than the polling, but I don't think the polling is that far off.
No, it's not 2016 off, probably.
Right. I don't get that feeling. So this is going to be really interesting to see how all this plays out.
So if I am a Tim Scott, right? If I am a Paul Ryan, a name that, nobody remembers anymore, I have to explain to these kids how ironic it is that Kevin McCarthy is about to get ousted by this turbo right-wing caucus whenever he was the one who was trying to oust the moderate Speaker of the House 15 years ago.
What's interesting to me is we look back at Paul Ryan,
Mhm.
and now think of him as a moderate. At
Yeah,
the
oh, God.
time, he was like, he's kind of white. He's got some crazy ideas.
Yeah, he was
but
radical.
now it's like,
Pinch his cheeks, little Reagan. Like, I mean, yeah, we would.
I'm just saying.
I think that a
our-
lot of
our
the Republican Party
perceptions-
would kill for a Paul Ryan.
Our perceptions seem to
Yeah.
change, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But Tim Scott, Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, who's announced he's not going to seek re-election.
Oh, God, that's painful.
That cohort, that portion of the Republican Party,
They're gonna have to go find
they're homeless
a
right
new
now. They
ideology.
really are.
Right, exactly. So what
That-
do they do? What do we make a new doctrine? I mean, realignment. I mean, you've got to find something to.
Yeah, I don't
the
know.
No Labels Party is certainly not.
Doesn't seem to be
viable
going
at
anywhere,
all,
right?
Yeah,
That's the problem with third parties is,
unfortunately.
look, the Republicans and Democrats have all the resources, all the infrastructure
Right.
to do this. To run as a third party, you've got to find a way to be competitive and gain those resources. And it would take, right? It would take not a handful of Republican officials saying, we're leaving and doing something.
Yeah.
You would need hundreds of them
yeah.
across the country and all uniting to go in
Yeah.
one direction. Not, we're going to start this one over here, we're going to start this faction over here. That's not going to work, right? And I don't know that unity of purpose is
Yeah.
there as of yet, right? And maybe
Yeah.
some of them are thinking, look, we'll get past Trump and things will settle back down. I don't think so. I don't think so. No. When you look at, as you said, when you look at the trouble that the speaker, who is considered fairly conservative, is having just maintaining his
Yeah.
position because of the Trump faction in the House.
I don't
right?
think he makes it to the end of the year. But we can talk about that momentarily.
Well, there are some other government officials that might not make it to the end of the year for completely different reasons. But yeah, so I mean, it's just right now. Things are so unsettled there, and on the one hand, Democrats can say, "Hey, we've got an opportunity to pick up some folks," but they haven't seemed to be quite willing to go aggressively do that, right? And so that's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, right? So the two leading candidates for president, both over 70, right? Over 70 years old. If I'm under 35,
Yes.
do either of these folks appeal to me?
I don't know, kids, do they?
Am I just like, yeah, give me that Biden, I like that, or Trump?
Not say that again.
Anybody? Just
Anybody excited about either of them? Not to put you on the spot, just kind of curious. Yeah.
so I mean, but there's nobody. I mean, and Ramaswamy, as you said, is a millennial. You've got
Yes, I don't want to claim him.
some Gen X candidates that aren't doing anything either. And so how long are these octogenarians going to be controlling things, right? You've got Mitch McConnell, the minority leader in the Senate, who every time he steps in front of the cameras just...
Buffers? I call it buffering.
It's something... I think I saw an article that said, well, hasn't been a stroke. Okay, well, there's something going on.
Pretty close.
Right?
Yeah.
Feinstein. You have Dianne Feinstein from California, who I don't think has shown up in a year or more.
Oh, she has, but they've been weakened at Bernie's. Do you not remember a couple of weeks ago, she had to be told to vote. She went into this whole debate about why she was going to vote against it, and the senator next to her was like, no, Dianne, just vote. Just say no. God. This is not good.
And so you've got this older cohort that refuses to give up power.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Nancy Pelosi running again.
And so how long are people going to allow that to last?
How long are you going to allow it to last? If you are in my class, you know that I get you fired up about this stuff and talk about generational politics to make you upset about it, so that you will go and vote and do something about it. But this is going to be the status quo as long as 18 to 35-year-olds do not come out and vote in large enough numbers. They don't have any reason to talk to you. They don't have any reason to put up candidates that care about the things that you care about until you turn out and vote. Children's.
Yeah,
Your Stacey loves you.
It's funny to me. Who was it? Was it Ramaswamy or one of the other I think it was Ramaswamy who floated the idea maybe we should raise the voting age to whatever.
Yes.
And people are, people are freaking out, but you won't freak out enough to go and vote.
No.
You won't. I want that right, but I don't really want to use it. I want to think about that I can. I should be able to, but don't expect me to. Right? That's basically the attitude that age bracket has.
Yep.
And as long as they turn out at lower rates than the older age brackets, that's what they're going to get.
Unfortunately.
And yes, there are being an incumbent gives you lots of advantages, but they're not insurmountable. And nobody can make you vote for someone, right? When I go into that polling booth, right, if I'm sitting there and I've got an 80 or 90-year-old, and I'm like, okay, you have a choice, right? Maybe that 80 or 90-year-old is of your party,
Right.
all right? I got to vote for my party. Do you? Okay. But if you do, just know that's what you're going to get, right? That is what you're going to get. You're going to get that mindset is what's going to be there. And it's a very different mindset than what you might have about a whole range of things.
Not might, definitely, right? As somebody who is 80 years old, and this is certainly not ageist, they have much different priorities than what your tuition is,
Sure.
or net neutrality,
Sure.
or your rights to data and privacy online. They're not thinking about these things. That's not on their radar,
Or
right?
how high your Social Security taxes should be to pay for their benefit.
Or if you're going to have Social Security at all.
Right. I got mine.
No,
I don't.
I
But
don't.
you know what I'm saying. That's the attitude. We got ours. The rest of you just need to.
Mine's probably not going to be there. Anyway, we have veered off 2024 just a little bit.
A little bit, but that age
but
thing
it's,
is,
yeah, no, it's important.
It's huge,
right?
And we're starting to see the results of some of this with these members of Congress that are having
Yeah.
clearly health issues.
Oh, yeah.
Biden hasn't helped himself a whole lot in some things that have happened with him.
Certainly.
To argue that, see, Biden's too old, we should vote for Trump. Well, Trump's
I mean,
not much,
yeah.
3 or 4 years difference?
Barely,
maybe?
I think.
Maybe,
2 or 3.
right? They're both over
Yeah.
70. So, yeah, I think all of that plays into it. But the reason you're not getting younger candidates, by and large, is younger voters,
They're not participating.
they're not pressing that issue, right?
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
is problematic. Again, it's not ageist to point out that in the room that we're sitting in right now, your president is likely to be 3 times your age or more.
Right.
Right?
Right.
The priorities there, the policy priorities there are going to be vastly different. I mean, we're only about a decade apart, maybe not even, and our priority issues are vastly different. He's got kids that are grown. I've got a 4-year-old, right? So just even our minimal generational differences mean different policy priorities for the two of us. So just imagine that being now 3 to 4 times your age sitting here. That's
And the experiences that we grew up in
Yeah.
change our perspectives on things,
Totally.
right? People who went through the Great Depression had a much different perspective than the generation that came after them. And the generation that came after them had a different perspective than the subsequent generation, right? And so the experiences that you go through and the challenges that each generation are asked to face are different, and that shapes their
Absolutely.
understanding of the politics that should be practiced, the policies that should be put into place.
Yeah.
And right now, it just seems like we have a very aging cohort. I should have done this before we came. I'd love to see what the median age of a member of Congress is versus the median age of the public.
Oh, I don't know
bet
of
it
the
is
public, yeah.
The median age of the public is 38, 39,
I
and
think the
it's been
median age
steadily
of
going
Congress is about 57, 58.
up. So about 20 years
Yeah.
older.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that makes a difference.
And it recently went down thanks to folks like AOC and Maxwell Frost, who is the new 25-year-old from Florida,
Okay.
the first Gen Zer who got into the House of Representatives. So that average age of Congress has actually gone down in recent years, but still insanely high.
Yeah.
So next Wednesday, I mentioned the next presidential debate, the Republican primary debate. On the 27th, I'm hosting a watch party here at Rose State College. So if you're interested, please, email me or just come and eat some pizza and play some debate bingo with me. It's going to be a good time had by everybody. So you've got a few folks who have qualified. As I mentioned before, Trump is not going to show up to this one, even though I guess technically he hasn't qualified for any of these debates because he's refused to sign the pledge. So the pledge is that all of these candidates, right, that are running will support whoever is eventually the front runner or the nominee for the Republican Party. All of these other candidates who are on the debate stage have signed that pledge. Trump refuses to sign that pledge.
So that's interesting to me because at the debate, I think Christie kind of said, no, I wouldn't. But did he actually sign something?
He
that
signed
said
it,
he would?
yeah.
Maybe that was just to get on the platform. And Hutchinson kind of seemed to back away from that a little bit. He was iffy.
Yeah.
He was
I don't know that he
but
knows what
yeah,
he's
I
doing.
mean that really does show you how much, because the question that was asked was, will you support Donald Trump if he wins the nomination? Right. And all of them but one or two said yes. Right. And so at some point you're like, well, why are you bothering to run then?
Exactly. Why are you here?
Yes. So that was very interesting. Just one more little piece of evidence that says that that party has shifted, and it really is Trump's party.
It is. So you've got Trump not showing up. So the big ones are DeSantis, Ramaswamy, Haley, Pence, Christie, and Scott. Those are the only ones that have qualified for this next debate. So it should be much more substantive. Right? I would think that they would spend a lot less time on the absence of Trump. At least I would hope. It's going to be hosted by Fox again. So I'm not quite sure if they will try to focus on that void, because they really did a pretty decent job of making us miss Trump in that first debate.
Well, I mean, I think that's what everybody's going to see when they see there is like, the person that we want to hear from is not here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see, where's this next one going to be held at?
You would have to ask me that. I knew it is. The third one has been announced, and it's going to be in Florida, which will be a hell of
that'll be interesting.
A great one. Where's this next one? No. I don't know where it is.
Okay. Well, what will be interesting is to see if you see the same kind of crowd and the same kind of reaction if any of the candidates are critical of Trump again, right? And certainly, if DeSantis goes into Florida and he's treated that way, that's kind of a bellwether right there, right?
Looks like it might be in Michigan.
Okay.
So we'll
see. So Trump is going to show upstage them by going in beforehand,
exactly.
Right?
So this should be a good show next week.
What do we want to open it up to some questions?
Yeah.
Anybody got any questions?
See if I can get some kids some extra
some
credit
folks
today.
are over there. They're just like been holding it in. They're like, yes.
So you mentioned earlier in the podcast that DeSantis was not doing well in the Republican primary polls, and I recently read an article saying that he hit, quote, rock bottom in the Republican Party polls in New Hampshire, and I was wondering if you had any insights on how he may recover or any opinions on that in general.
So I don't think he can. I mean, look, he's clearly second place. But
not a strong second place.
It's not a strong second place. He's nowhere near Trump.
Yeah.
I don't know, in this environment, I don't know what he can do.
Yeah.
He is a governor who was reelected by a wide margin in just 2 years ago, when most of the Trump candidates that ran for like Congress and such, and even other state offices, were defeated.
Yep.
He represents one of the largest, most populous states in the country, in Florida. And he can't get to 20% in a Republican primary poll.
Not good.
I don't know what you do to swing that. Now, listen, there are a lot of campaign activities that occur behind the scenes, right? But there are things when they're on the ground in New Hampshire or on the ground in Iowa that can make a difference. But that ought to start showing up in the polls in those states.
Yes.
And as of yet, I haven't seen that either, right? And that's one thing I would caution you. The polls that really matter are the polls of each individual state, right?
Yeah.
That's what's really going to help us figure out where things are going to land. And I don't see in Iowa, I don't see in New Hampshire that that DeSantis is significantly gaining ground in
Yeah.
those early primary or caucus states.
Yeah, we call that Big Mo, right? The Big Mo, the momentum. So in presidential primaries, as you should know, Iowa, the Iowa caucus, and of course the New Hampshire primary have been bellwethers in American politics, even though these two states demographically do not look at all demographically like the rest of the United States. Both are exceedingly Caucasian and both hyper religious, right? Iowa being evangelical and New Hampshire being Catholic. And so to still kind of use these states as indicators in terms of primary
Didn't the
presidential
Democrat
politics.
Party say that they were not
Yep,
going
they're going to use Michigan.
So
The
Michigan
big
is
one,
going to
yeah,
be
Michigan
the first
is the big
primary,
one,
so,
yeah.
right.
But typically, a presidential candidate goes into Iowa, and if they can't get, first, second, third, they're praying, right? At that point, you're praying that you're going to get something happening in New Hampshire. Bill Clinton is the quintessential example of this, right? Bombs Iowa in 92,
Right.
goes to New Hampshire and is the comeback kid, right, quote unquote, and is able to win that primary and sets himself up for the rest of the campaign. At this point, DeSantis is eating it in Iowa. He's eating it in New Hampshire, right? You've got to have some sort of momentum somewhere, right? You need to be building those numbers, as Professor Davenport said, be doing some of that groundwork and gaining popularity. And this dude is just not doing it. It doesn't help that he's changed staff about 15 times in the last
and
6 months either.
I'm just not sure what the message he could give that would shift those folks who are committed to Trump right now. And that's the challenge, right? Is if you're committed to Trump after everything that's happened over the last year or so,
You're not going to DeSantis.
I don't know what argument anybody's going to make to peel you away from Trump, right? And that seems to be the challenge.
And specifically the next Trumpiest dude.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
And he's got a problem, bro. He's got big problems. Good question. Yeah.
So kind of like going back on what the other person was saying, and how it seems like there's not that much like a Republican Party, and it's just a bunch of people supporting or being very mainly against one person. Do you feel like having that type of figurehead politics, kind of like where it's just the idea and the things that this one person says instead of the actual values of the party as a whole, do you think can kind of be like damaging to our whole system of government as something that's supposed to be all fair and all democratic? If you just have somebody that has so much public recognition and so much public, like he causes so much news and outcry that he's more than likely going to win every time just because his name is more known. You feel like that kind of like, I don't know, mitigates the whole process. It kind of makes it seem like it's not as effective, I guess.
Do you want me to get on my soapbox
Go
about
ahead.
celebrity-centered
Go ahead.
politics?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, candidate-centered politics, celebrity-centered politics, however you want to put it. It's personalistic, right? And so, I mean, you said it perfectly, right? You're not running on, or you're not voting on, voting based upon a party's values or ideology or principles. You're voting because that's Kanye West or that's Donald Trump. And at that point, when you elect that person, you don't know what they stand for, right? So you're at the whims of this politician that you've elected, and you don't know anything about them, right? Any concrete values like we do in the platform, that's these stated positions. So yeah, I find that incredibly dangerous for a democracy to have, and unfortunately, I don't know how we move away from it, right? It's kind of part and parcel of the digital age, right? We're all influencers, we're all on the social media, and so you're the soundbite generation. So Trump, calling Carly Fiorina's face ugly, or whatever. Those are sound bites that are gonna fly across the internet, right? That are gonna go viral, that are gonna be on CNN, MSNBC, etc. And so, I mean, yeah, I think we learned a little bit of that lesson in 2016 specifically. You didn't see Trump spend any money in the primary campaign on media, and he didn't need to, right? If that was one thing that we learned, is that you don't have to have campaign finance, special interest groups finance your primary campaign. If you're a B-list celebrity, you've got enough followers out there, and you're bombastic enough. If people don't know what you're going to say, those cable networks followed him around like I've never seen any presidential candidate.
Sure.
I mean, even into the administration, we've never seen a White House, the press conferences, the daily press
Sure.
briefings were televised for like the first year.
Yep.
That's unheard of. And so, yeah, I think the celebrity-centered politics, candidate-centered politics is extremely dangerous, man. Please, please pay attention to what these candidates have to say that is deeper than, oh, I want this to happen, right? What are their values? What are their ideologies? What tethers them to some sort of value, to truth, to justice, whatever it might be. But yeah, just voting because that's Kanye West and he's going to put, young Jeezy on the Supreme Court, that's not good enough for me. Love you.
The only thing I'll add to that is, and I agree with everything that Dr. Stacy just said, is the media environment we're in makes it to where that is the game that candidates have to play,
Yeah.
right? And the other thing I will mention, I mentioned that the Republicans not having a party platform, but the reality is the party platforms are pretty irrelevant right now because I can be a candidate, not even, just think, let's go back. One of the major candidates in 2016 and 2020 for the Democrat Party nomination is not even a Democrat, and that's Bernie Sanders. Right? The parties can't even control who runs for their nomination. And so, to a certain extent, the parties have this infrastructure and they have the name, but what matters is how well that candidate appeals, and every candidate's going to take advantage of their strengths to try to appeal in a way that they think will get it. Yeah. Trump's strength is just being, again, bombastic, being out there. Everything I do is the greatest, the best, the most wonderful. And if you don't agree, there's something wrong with you, right? And so that gets play. That gets play. And we saw that when Trump was no longer president, and the ratings for all of these cable news things just dropped. Dropped
CNN,
like a rock.
Precipitously.
Because no longer it wasn't entertaining anymore. Nobody really cared. Nobody wanted to tune in and find out what thing did Trump say today that got everybody agitated one way or the other. Right? Yeah.
It was a good one.
Yeah.
I guess you're kind of like saying since he causes a lot of traffic, that's kind of the way that politics has to be done now. Is kind of
Unfortunately,
In certain instances, it really is. I think Jasmine had a question.
So you guys haven't really talked about this topic, but I would love to know your opinion on it. So what do you guys think that Republicans and Democrats' new strategies is going to be towards the problems in the Middle East and the countries that are actively threatening the United States?
Oh, this is up your alley.
I mean, that would be lovely if they talked about foreign policy, but that's not a thing that has been discussed at all. Not usually.
The closest
ever.
they got in the first debate
We're
was
gonna
all
invade
over
Mexico.
Ukraine, right?
No,
Well,
we're going to invade Mexico
Yes,
was
yes.
the takeaway from the first one. Other than being critical, rightfully so, of Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan, you've not heard really anything in terms of foreign policy, specifically within the Middle East. So I'll be very interested to see how folks will continue, or if they will continue, I should say, the more aggressive policies of Trump, such as moving the embassy, to Jerusalem in Israel, right?
Right.
So I'm very interested to see how that plays out. In terms of Middle East policy currently, I'm very interested in the deal that Biden is working on right now that looks like it may get Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel, which would be a monumental task.
Pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive, yeah. Typically, foreign policy, in terms of the Middle East specifically, is likely not going to come up until probably the general election. I'd be really surprised. Right now, Russia and China are the big
Well, the
deals.
only thing I don't understand is why they're focusing so much in like areas like Mexico, and they're focusing on that when we have countries like Iran,
Sure.
that are actively
Yeah.
here.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
why do you think the focus is so much in Mexico when we have the whole Middle
Because Mexico is at our southern border. People are already pissed off about the southern border, and that's a way to make people angry and get them to the polls, right? So if I can reach out and touch you, then I'm going to do it. And so the Middle East is not something that we're necessarily really fired up about anymore, right? The war on terror, right, has kind of dissipated. Not in my mind.
I think Republicans don't want to get too embroiled in
at
that
all.
with the failure in
I
Afghanistan,
don't
the
think
failure
so.
in Iraq. So they're not going to do that. They can take advantage of the fact that whatever you think about should be done regarding immigration, whatever you think should be done regarding the southern border, Biden doesn't seem to have made anybody happy in the way his administration has dealt with that issue. So I think that's what you're going to see Republicans attack on that is that issue right there. As Dr. Stacey said, it's close, it's immediate. We can have cameras there
It's a
showing
direct
what's
threat.
going on.
Yeah.
You've had governors, you've had members
National
of Congress,
Guard.
you've had all sorts of
Yeah.
people going down there to say we're going to see what's really going on, and so I think that's
Yeah.
of anything related to foreign policy, that's the thing that's
That's
going to
tangible.
be
Yeah.
played up because unlike the Middle East, the Republicans can really harp on this.
As a failure.
They can tie it to Joe Biden
Yeah.
much more directly
Yeah.
than anything that's going on in other places.
Yeah. If the Middle East, they're going to have to eat some of that responsibility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Other? Yeah.
You spoke earlier about there not being many strong Democratic frontrunners, or to try and approach the nomination.
Sure.
There have been whispers of a possible run from Governor Gavin Newsom of California. I was curious what you thought the likelihood of that happening is, and what effects that might have on the run for the nomination.
I think it would be detrimental. I think that if Gavin Newsom were to run as a Democrat, he would. It would be more advantageous, I think, for him to run as an independent and try to peel people away from that middle. But he doesn't. I don't think he gets anywhere with the Democratic establishment in this race specifically.
Yeah. And the last time we saw something like that occur was 1980 election. When you had an incumbent Democrat, Jimmy Carter, and he gets a challenge by another Kennedy, Ted Kennedy,
Yeah.
and
good one.
and he basically weakens Carter's chances
Yeah.
in the general election.
Yeah.
And
So
I think that's the
yeah.
same thing you'd see play out.
If that happens, Trump he waltzes into the White House.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if Newsom were to go third party, I think the same thing.
Yeah, I
That's right.
agree.
Because the voters he's going to peel away
Are ones that
primarily
Trump needs.
Democrat
Yeah.
leaning. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that Newsom is a great candidate in the future. It's just not the right time for him. He needs some more national play.
I think Republicans would love for him to do it.
God, yes,
right?
yeah,
But I
they
just,
would.
yeah.
They'd eat him alive. Oh my God, on the COVID protocol. I mean, they would eat him.
Yeah. And I don't think you make that. I don't think you make that decision to take that action if you're not sure you can win, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're going to be blamed for losing the general
Yeah,
election.
exactly.
Right. And then
And I
that
think
really undermines his
He's
future
smarter
chances.
than that. I think
Yeah.
Newsom is smarter than that. It's a good idea to get those whispers out there and kind of get the inkling, right? Get the word of mouth going for maybe a 28, something like that. But he's not going to do anything. If he were, he would have already done it. Being a smart
Yeah,
man.
you're getting pretty late in the game
Yeah,
to jump
absolutely.
in at this point.
What's up, my friend?
Oh, kind of going off of that. Is with the Democrat Party not having any strong runners, is there anybody in like election 2028 that you are looking forward to?
No is my answer. No, I don't. Not that is on my horizon right now. I don't see any of your progressive, like AOC caucus. That's not going to fly. That is not going to be generalizable to a moderate independent base for them to be successful in an election. So at this point, I'm at a loss in terms of the Democrats.
Yeah,
Harris
I mean,
doesn't win.
that's going to be a challenge for when Biden isn't the candidate.
Yeah, Harris doesn't win on her own.
Who's going to be the candidate that
I
from
wish
that
she would.
party
I
that
would love
can
for that to
continue
happen, but
to
it's not
appeal
going to.
to moderate voters, right? And when the choice isn't whoever the Democrat candidate is and Donald Trump,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
As long as Republicans insist on putting Donald Trump up, they're giving Democrats a built-in advantage,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
That doesn't mean they'll win, but it's giving
Right.
them a built-in advantage,
Yeah.
right? What Democrats have to be thinking about is how do we appeal to this moderate base when we don't have Biden and Republicans aren't putting Trump up again?
And pull the youth in. If they would just focus on that youth vote and recruiting candidates from a millennial, from that generation that are not, hell bent on rapping Eminem songs for fun, I think they would be doing something beneficial for themselves. They're not thinking. I don't think that either party really is thinking towards the future in terms of
Right.
Who runs next in the next generation. It's election by election, and unfortunately, again, if you guys are not voting, then they're going to keep putting these old heads up.
That is correct, right? And some of that is, also stop looking around waiting for somebody else to step up and
True.
run, right?
Yeah,
Some of
absolutely.
that is, I don't see anybody else I like better than who are talking what I want to talk about. I'm going to do it.
Yep.
Right? And stepping out there. That's a hard decision to
Do
make.
it.
And it's a lot of work to run for office.
It is.
And
I can tell ya.
there's no guarantee that you'll win. I can tell you that too. But if you want people to talk about your issues and you're not seeing anybody do it, sometimes you just got to say, I'm going to be the person who steps up and does it. Right?
All right, I think we got time for one more question. I mean, that was like several.
Oh, we got someone way back over here.
Hey, Alice. All right, maybe we'll take 2 more questions. What's up, Alice?
So, you guys didn't talk about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but I have a question about it.
Okay.
What is your opinion on, like, all the benefits it did for Oklahoma, and what is your opinion on Governor Stitt saying or vetoing that bill?
I don't know. First of all, you can't.
Why do you think he would?
The governor can't veto a measure from Congress. So
Right.
I don't know
So
where that was coming from. But let me just put this out there. Every infrastructure bill that has ever been passed is a boondoggle, meaning we're going to spend massive amounts of money on all sorts of projects that we don't need to be spending money on. We have other priorities, but why? Well, if you're in my political theory class and you remember talking about Machiavelli, what does Machiavelli say is one of the best things to do if you're a ruler? Build stuff. Build stuff that people see, right? And when I build stuff that people see, I make them think I'm doing something, right? And so I am always skeptical of infrastructure bills, just like I'm always skeptical of defense spending, because those two places, when we put money into those places, we just randomly throw money at whatever,
Yeah.
right? And whether or not it's the right thing to be throwing it at, or whether or not it produces any kind of real results, is secondary to the fact that somebody's going to get their name placed on this new bridge, or somebody's going to get their name placed on this new federal building, or whatever, and I'm going to get to look like I've done something for the people, so to speak. So, but the fact that Biden got it passed, number one, was pretty impressive because
Yes.
it was stalled in Congress
It
for a
was
long time.
yeah.
And he was able to, and I don't remember it being too bipartisan. I don't know how many Republicans voted for that. I don't
Enough.
Just
barely.
Yeah, I just can't remember.
Yeah.
But what I have seen criticism of are Republicans who voted against it now celebrating the federal
Yeah,
spending that's happening.
Right. Yay, rural broadband.
Go figure. This is what's going to happen, right?
Right.
Because it's spending in their district. They're going to
Take credit for it.
promote it, take credit for it,
Yeah.
right? And most people aren't going to track whether or not they actually voted
No.
for it.
All right, one last one. No, you're done? All right.
So far it has kind of been established that the Democratic side doesn't really have a strong leader to kind of unify behind, and then the Republican Party is more so the Trump Party. If things can still happen until the election, but
Sure.
if in the event that, say, Trump does not win the election like in 2020, do you think that that could prompt a sort of dissolution of the Trump Party, or do you think that it would still find something to strengthen itself and become even more encompassed by the Trump Party?
That's a really good question, and here's what I think is it will remain Trump Party. Any candidate that wants to win that party's nomination is going to have to operate in the shadow of Trump, perhaps even get his
Ordained.
blessing,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
To do so, and anybody who's like, we need to do something else, they're going to have to go. They're going to have to say we cannot be part of this party anymore. But I think for all intents and purposes, that is Trump's party, and it will remain that for the foreseeable future until something happens. You know, the best thing that occurs for parties who are moving in directions that don't match with where the public is they start losing elections.
Yeah.
And they figure that out, right? had Republicans not gotten the slim majority that they got in the House,
Yeah.
that might have made them think twice about this. But they did get a majority, as slim as though it is.
Yeah.
If they keep it, if they eke out a majority, and I think this election year, there are more Democrats up for re-election in the Senate than there are Republicans. So, if they are able to get a slim majority in the Senate and maintain this Trumpian aura about them, that's just going to solidify that.
Yeah, which is worrisome, right? The okay news at this point is that your Senate is not, right? And so it's kind of the voice of reason. So whenever these articles of impeachment on Biden inevitably end up in the Senate, they're not going anywhere, right? And so that's the sort of danger there. Whenever we talk about that extraordinarily slim margin in the Senate, if and when it goes back towards the Republicans, what kind of shenanigans occur then?
Well, I just don't think anybody's going to be surprised
Yeah.
if they're aggressive, right?
Yeah, I don't agree. Yeah,
And in
absolutely.
what they do.
Absolutely.
And I think the shame for the Democrat Party in all of this is they've had an opportunity to make some inroads and to do some things to strengthen their positioning with moderate voters, with independent voters, and they just have not done that. At least not to the extent that I think the door was opened for them to do so.
I agree.
And that, in my opinion, is a choice that party made, right? That wasn't an accident. Oh, we just didn't see that opportunity. I think they deliberately have chosen a different
Because
direction.
they don't know who they are,
Yeah.
right? Again, it's that identity crisis. Is it the Biden, moderate
Right.
Clinton party, or
Right.
is it the AOC progressive? It's
And-
that tethering.
And my perception is the Biden wing of the party is the diminishing wing.
Yeah, I
And the
agree.
AOC, Elizabeth
agree.
Warren types are
I
the
agree.
growing part of that party.
But that does not equal campaign election success.
No, it doesn't.
At all.
No, it doesn't.
Be interesting in the future, though. Thank you for being sequestered here.
We appreciate it. We're glad you turned out. Good questions.
Yes, indeed. We will be back with a special episode tomorrow that we're actually recording. So stay tuned, Not My Generation folks. We'll be back.
That's right.